This is Solve It for Kids.
Hello, my amazing and curious friends. My name is Jennifer, the Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, and this is Solve It for Kids, the podcast that gives kids and families a peek inside the real world of scientists, engineers, and experts as they solve problems in their jobs using creativity, cooperation, and critical thinking. And now please welcome to the show my podcast partner, Galactic Space Geek, Jeff Gagne.
Hello, Jennifer, and hello, listeners. Even though we're on summer break, you know Galactic Space Geek Jeff is excited when the best of episode goes to space.
Exactly. So what best of episode will we be hearing from today?
The best of space exploration.
Ooh, the best of space exploration, and not just space exploration, but to the moon.
That's right.
This is going to be so much fun. So we're going to have clips from 3 episodes. The first one is episode 135. How do you power a spacecraft? With Carl Sandifer. Episode 158. Why does a spacecraft need a heat shield? With Dr. Sarah D'Souza. And episode 154, how do you slow down a spaceship? With Julie Wolfson. These are all great questions, don't you think, Jeff?
Absolutely. This is going to be a great trilogy, so set aside some time. You're going to want to re-listen to these full episodes.
How do you power a spacecraft?
How do you power a spacecraft? Well, that is a question we have not talked about yet, so I'm very excited to hear the answer to this. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Today we have the man to answer that question for us, Mr. Carl Sandifer II, who is the manager of the radioisotope Power Systems Program at NASA's Glenn Research Center.
Welcome to the show, Carl.
Thank you so much. I am so glad to be here today.
Well, we are thrilled to have you. As all of our listeners know, Jeff and I are big, huge space geeks. And now we get to talk even more about how to power a spacecraft. But I like to start from the beginning. Have you always been interested in space as a kid?
So I've got to say, I truly have always been interested in space. With my family, look at the stars. And I always used to tell my mom and my dad, I said, wow, imagine how big the stars must be to be able to see them from here. So I've always had that in my mind throughout my entire life.
Okay.
That's fantastic.
So I'm in a situation where I get to actually support finding new things throughout the solar system. So dream come true.
That is a very cool job, and one I'm sure a lot of our listeners can really relate to. So knowing that you had always liked space, because you now are the manager of the Power Systems Program, were you always involved in powered things as well, like motorsports, dirt bikes kind of thing? Were you always interested in powering things, or did that just kind of happen?
So I would say a little bit of happenstance. So I've always loved mathematics. My favorite subject was math throughout pretty much all of grade school. And it was one of those situations where I wasn't sure if I was going to become a math teacher or if I wanted to become an engineer. And so at some point, I was thinking I might be a designer, maybe a car designer or.
Okay.
At that time, I was completely open, but I knew I loved math and was trying to find an opportunity to use it in something that inspired me.
I like to hear that.
That's awesome. We've talked about this a lot on the show, is how much math an engineer has to know. But yet it's not daunting, right? Like, can you talk a little bit about the type of math so people aren't like, oh gosh, I don't want to be an engineer because there's so much math, right? But isn't it kind of more applied math, like how you use it for things?
It truly is. And as a matter of fact, my degree is in applied mathematics.
Oh.
And it's all about, okay, how can I use this in a tangible fashion? And so, first of all, once I learned that there was a NASA in Cleveland, Ohio, the Glenn Research Center, right here in my backyard, I said, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to work there someday? And so while I was in college, I pursued the internship program and was able to get in. Wonderful. But one of the first things that I got to do to utilize all the math that I learned throughout my life was I got placed with a team that studied different ways of getting to space, trajectories. So trying to find math, almost like Google Maps, but for space. Trying to find
I love that.
Any opportunity to creatively get from one place to another place in the most cost-effective way possible. And so I said, now that's a cool way to use some of the cool math tips I learned along the way.
I was just going to say, the way you were explaining it, it sounds like you really enjoyed that being the team you ended up getting put with. So from there, how did you pick applied math? Was it just a straight trajectory of, you know what, I like math, started with the internship program, applied mathematics is going to be a way that opens up several avenues? Or did your internship sort of point you in one specific direction?
All of the above. So,
okay.
I want to become a mechanical engineer. But after, meeting folks at NASA and really getting to understand, the types of different problems to be solved at NASA, I started to think, an applied mathematics degree would allow me to be more versatile. One of the other things that I considered doing, I guess this is when I was finalizing my degree program. And so again, I was a co-op. And so I had the opportunity to be a student and in between semesters work at NASA. And so I was able to kind of say, how can I tailor my education for the job? And so at the time I was thinking, okay, I might be in a position where I would calculate the probability of a micrometeoroid hitting your spacecraft when you're launching. Or I could be the person doing the calculations for the launch. So from that standpoint, I said, you know what? I'm going to focus more on the mathematics. And so
I like it.
Grooming by my professors and the grooming from my colleagues at NASA, put it all together. And I said, you know what? Applied mathematics is the way to go. Funny thing is they hired me as an aerospace engineer.
Wow. That is funny.
I like that.
Yeah. And got the training as an aerospace engineer through my aerospace engineering colleagues.
I mean, that's fantastic. I mean, it sounds like you can do kind of whatever you want. And now you're helping to power spacecrafts through radioisotope power systems. That's what we want to talk about.
Yep.
So in a nutshell, can you explain that to our listeners? Like what powers the spacecraft? And are we talking like the Mars rover? This is what you power?
That is exactly right. So I guess the first thing I'll say, when you're in the depths of space, right? Power is just one thing that you cannot do without. You need technology
of course,
that, that's reliable, that you can count on. Without power in space, our knowledge of the solar system would only be a fraction of what it is today.
Why does a spacecraft need a heat shield?
Why does a spacecraft need a heat shield? Oh, I feel an amazing space episode coming up. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Jen, you must be able to see into the future, because this is going to be a great episode with Dr. Sarah D'Souza. She is Deputy Subsystems Manager at NASA Ames Research Center.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Sarah.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to join you all.
Well, we are excited to have you here, not the least because Jeff and I are huge fans of Orion. We both saw Artemis launch in person, and I mean, it was amazing.
Yes. Wow.
I can imagine.
It was amazing. So we have followed the wonderful trek of Orion out and around and back. So we are excited to hear from you. But I like to start at the beginning. Did you always know that you were going to be an engineer and work on heat shields?
The short answer is no. But I like to tell this story. Gosh, it was when I was a college student still, and my family were going through old photos. And my sister, because I was working at Johnson Space Center at the time, still it's NASA in Houston. And she sends me a picture, and it's of my mom holding me. I'm still a baby, definitely less than a year. And behind her is a poster of the NASA space shuttle. So I like to say, and I'm sure my dad was taking the picture. And I like to say that I think from when I was a baby, this was my destiny.
That is fantastic.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
So, but all that being said, I think the turning point for me was when I was in high school. I joined the junior ROTC program, or Air Force Junior ROTC program. And there, I already had an interest in stars. I was already paying attention to the Mars robotics missions, Curiosity, all of those. But it hadn't like crystallized in my head about my vocation. Yes. And when I was in high school, joining that program, there was a colonel who taught us all about aircraft and sort of the history of it. And and it was at that point that I was like, I want to be an aerospace engineer. And that's awesome. And from that point on, that was my goal. And then in college is when I really got excited. And it actually was something that I realized I could do, was work for NASA. It wasn't even like I knew NASA existed, but it wasn't even sort of in my mind. I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. I wanted to be an astronaut, but I didn't know the vehicles, right? I didn't know the
exactly.
How do you do that?
Yeah.
And so once I figured out, like in college, once I got my Pathways internship with NASA Johnson Space Center, my fate was sealed. And I was like, yep, this is what I'm doing.
That's awesome. I love that.
Just for fun, I know we're going to talk about what you're doing now, which is super cool. Do you remember the first project you were working on when you got to NASA with that internship?
Yes. It's a great question, Jeff. It was the one beautiful thing, if anyone in college has the opportunity to do this, the Pathways program was really, really great because it gave me a breadth of opportunity to look at what did I want to do as an aerospace engineer.
Okay.
So this first co-op, I would have never thought I would have been there. But it was looking at or studying the systems required to do water filtration and recovery on board the International Space Station.
Wow.
So what was really, I had no idea that I would be learning about water filtration at NASA. I just, until you do things, you don't understand, right? So it was just so... There I learned about the resourcefulness of our NASA folks. Like you can't just buy things all the time. So you go, what can I use in the lab? Learn from my mentors and my managers just about what lengths they go to take care of the astronauts who are on board ISS to make sure that we're utilizing resources properly. I mean, it was just a really amazing experience. And one of the fun things was, because they've got this prototype water filtration system in a lab, you're recycling, bathroom water, shower water, washing your hand, right? All of those things. So they wanted you to, if you rode your bike into work, they wanted you to take a shower in the lab. They gave them, tests the kind of water
materials.
You want to filter. Yeah. And so that's fun. There are multiple different ways to filter water. And that was actually the place that I learned, it's not just let's say the filter canisters we see in a Brita, right?
Right, exactly.
There's anaerobic and aerobic bacteria that you can put the water through and they kind of take care of some stuff. You've got UV, all these things that you can, that you kind of piece together to make the water that comes out of the other side potable. And so the other small great thing about that first co-op was at the time, my grandfather, he also he's a mechanical engineer on my mom's side. And he was working in water filtration. And so I,
oh, wow.
No kidding.
I was like, Grandma, I was like, for you.
That's a great connection.
That is a great connection. That's so fun. So, I mean, you went from water filtration to heat, right? So can you talk to us a little bit about Orion and how you got on that project and kind of what you do there for the Orion capsule?
Yeah, that's a very broad question, Jennifer. But I will try to answer it in a bit of a succinct way as best I can. Yeah. Throughout college, I was on a journey of what is it that I want to do, right? What is as an aerospace engineer? There's so many things you could do. I got very interested in guidance and control by the time I got to graduate school as a master's student.
Yeah.
And I love guidance and control. But I also love big picture. And while I took a focus for my graduate degree in guidance and control for entry vehicles, which is essentially when it enters the atmosphere, how do you steer it to make sure it gets to the spot it's supposed to?
Yes.
Right.
And I cut my teeth on some of the early development for Orion.
Wow.
So that's how I started off on just guidance and control for entry vehicles in general.
How do you slow down a spaceship?
How do you slow down a spaceship? That's true. This is a question I have always wanted the answer to. Who is our guest today, Jeff?
Our guest today, who won't speak at 25,000 miles per hour, is the awesome Julie Wolfson. She is Senior Staff Systems Engineer at Lockheed Martin. And in layman's terms, she is the Orion program's risk manager.
Awesome. Welcome to the show, Julie.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, we are excited to have you. I mean, first of all, if you've listened to the show at all, Jeff and I are huge fans of Orion, Lockheed Martin, Artemis.
Very much so.
Everything space. Like everything
Good.
Space.
Awesome.
So we are thrilled to talk to you about Orion, but I always like to start the show with, did you always know as a kid that you wanted to work on spacecraft?
I did not. I knew I wanted to be in something science related.
Okay.
I feel like I had the same dream as every other girl of my generation, which was, I'm going to be a marine biologist.
Oh, yes, I had that. I did have that.
Nice. And then, as you grow older and you look at what am I going to major in college and how much money do these people make? And marine biologists don't make very much money.
They don't. Unfortunately,
Right. So turns out I was really good at math, and I took an aptitude quiz, and it said, hey, you know what? You'd be a really good mechanical engineer. And I went, okay, I'll major in mechanical engineering. So I did that. Yeah. I worked in the automotive industry before I worked in space. And then things happened and I moved and got married and moved again. And now I work on space. So I kind of fell into it, but I love it. And I don't ever not want to work on space stuff anymore.
Okay.
Awesome.
So I have to ask, because you mentioned the aptitude test, and, kids and students are taking those all the time. And, it's a test for them, so they're not really paying too much attention to it. When you got the results of that, were you surprised by it, or did you already know you kind of had the aptitude and you liked what that was?
A little of both.
Okay.
I wasn't too surprised by it, but I was disappointed that the top three were all different, aspects of engineering. Like one was mechanical and one was biomedical. And so I don't know. I guess I thought it's going to tell me something really fun that I've never heard of before. And it didn't.
Right. Okay. That just gives our listeners a good idea for when they're taking those tests, that you're going to know some of that information, but maybe you pay attention to it and it leads you somewhere really cool.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
So you decided to be a mechanical engineer, and I'm curious, you started in the car industry, and I read a little bit about that, and you really liked working with cars. Can you tell us some of what you did initially there?
Yeah, I worked at a tier 1 automotive parts supplier who made hose and tube assemblies that went on cars. So we provided parts to General Motors and Toyota and Ford, and it was a more fast-paced industry than space. So in a year, I could, as a product engineer, get a drawing from General Motors, for example, and say, hey, yes, we can make that part for you. Here's what it'll cost. And get the factory set up to make that part, start making that part, see it installed on cars, and then be driving around and go, I have a part on that car, I have a part on that car. But with space, not so much, right? Because we won the Orion contract in 2006.
Right.
And we couldn't really point to, hey, look at our spaceship launching until 2014.
Right.
So that is not just 1 year.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
No, but it does level up the coolness factor.
Yes, absolutely.
Look at my spacecraft versus look at my sedan.
100%. Yeah.
So,
no offense to cars.
Of course not. We all get around in them.
So you are the Orion Risk Manager. Can you explain to us, what does that mean?
Right. So risk is all around us all the time, right? Every time we get in the car to go to work or school or soccer practice or whatever, there is a risk, right, that you will get in an accident or that you will get a flat tire or something will happen. And you have to balance these risks, right? Is it worth getting in the car if I'm going to have a flat tire? Well, probably, yes, it's worth getting in the car.
As opposed to walking or riding your bike miles.
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly. Unless you live in the city and you can walk everywhere, but I don't. So, but when you are putting people into space, there is way more risk than driving somewhere, to go get something to eat. So we have to manage our safety risks, our technical risks, and then there's also kind of a finance side of things. There is a risk that we will cause a schedule delay because something went wrong, or there is a risk that, this first design didn't work and we're going to have to redesign something and that's going to cost more. And so, so we've got these 4 aspects of risk that we have to manage on the program: cost, schedule, technical, and safety.
What a trilogy for a best of space exploration to the moon. Connecting these 3 episodes, how do you power a spacecraft? Why does a spacecraft need a heat shield? And how do you slow down a spaceship? These can all be connected to NASA's Artemis program. And all of that is happening right now, so I know these episodes are going to get listened to more than once.
Absolutely. So, again, where can you find the rest of the episode if you were intrigued by these clips? You go to our website, solveitforkids.com, or you can find it anywhere you listen to your podcasts. But don't forget that you can always tag us and ask us questions on our social media. We are at KidSolve at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And have fun with these amazing spacey episodes because you're going to learn so much from them.
Agreed. And until next time, Jen and Jeff are still on summer break, but are learning more about the Apollo program and getting more great space guests for you to listen to right here on
Solve It for Kids.